you. If you're listening to Wise Women's Stories, you could be any age. And wherever you are in your life, there's something here for you. If you're just beginning, you'll hear from women who once stood exactly where you stand now, uncertain, hopeful, and finding their way. And if you're in the middle of your life, building, questioning, reshaping, you may begin to see that there's always another chapter. And that chapter is yours to choose. And now, if you're stepping into your wise woman years, you'll discover you are not alone. There are women who have walked before you, who have taken life into their own hands and made difficult choices, creating something meaningful, not just for themselves, but for others, for their families. I'm your host, Delia Quigley, and this is Wise Woman Stories. Today I'm in conversation with Terri McClernon, a woman who, out of necessity, began with very little and built what is now known as the Food Fairy, a business that not only supported her growing family, but now nourishes countless others across the Triangle in North Carolina. Her journey wasn't quick, it wasn't easy, but it was guided by instinct, persistence, and a willingness to see possibilities where others might not. The stories you'll hear remind all of us there are no shortcuts. You can't push the river. You can only meet life as it unfolds. So let's begin with the early years, the 50s and the 60s, when Terri's story was just beginning. So Terri, you lived many lives before a food fair even existed, and much of it was around food. So if we go all the way back, what did food mean to you as a child growing up in the 1950s in your mother's kitchen?
Well, food was very satisfying, and it was a way to connect with the whole family because we did all sit down at the table at the same time and tell stories about the day. And so that was what food meant. Also, my mother was a very experiential cook. She was doing things that I don't think other mothers were doing, like tacos, in 1953. She and my father had been in Tucson during the war, so she knew about tacos, brought that back to Cincinnati. She had parties, and so shrimp cocktail and avocados, things that were not all that common in 1950s Cincinnati.
Did she teach you how to cook? Did she take you into the kitchen and show you what she was doing?
I don't think she did, that I recall, but I was certainly hovering. And I think my motivation for cooking is the end product was I want to make that too. So it wasn't so much that I knew how to cook. It's that my motivation for getting to the end was how I taught myself to cook.
Now you have to remember there wasn't the kind of access to health food or even information about it that we take for granted today. In the 60s and 70s, something was beginning to stir. Books were being passed from hand to hand, Diet for a Small Planet, The Vegetarian Epicure, and they were offering new ways of preparing healthy food, creating awareness about the body and about the earth. The Back to the Land movement was taking hold. People were leaving cities, heading into the countryside, learning, sometimes mostly the hard way, how to live more simply, to grow their own food, to preserve it, to make do with what they had. And it was in this world, in upstate New York, near Bethel, that Terri found herself, living close to the land, learning by doing, cooking, experimenting, preserving, season by season. What about the 60s? Where were you then?
Well, I graduated from high school in 1969, and so I was still at home for most of the 60s, eating with my family. And by the way, I want to say they used to take us out to a restaurant, a regular fancy restaurant, was where I ate lobster tails and blue cheese dressing, at the age of like 9 or 10. So anyway, around 1970 or so, 1969, I actually moved out of the house and I became a vegetarian. And I knew nothing about being a vegetarian. I just knew that it was vegetables. And I had been hanging out in California a little bit with friends. And so I was motivated to try this new way of eating. Then if we jump to like 1972, my Aunt Jo, my father's sister, she was a vegetarian, and she sent me Diet for a Small Planet, that cookbook.
That one changed a lot of lives right there.
It did. It did. And it really showed me, there's a method to this, to eating healthy while being a vegetarian, food combining, for proteins.
Well, that's about when you started living off the land up in New York, right?
Yep. That was just before that, or maybe it was around the same time. And then, yes, I was living, my first husband and I threw a tent on his 10 acres. And I had a Coleman stove and a picnic table. And I began to cook on that. I made a breadboard out of leftover tongue and groove flooring. And I decided to make my own bread. I baked it on the Coleman stove. I gathered wild blueberries. I taught myself how to can I didn't teach myself. I probably got a book. Certainly there was no Google. So you had to get a book or meet someone who could show you how. Back then, I wonder if I'll ever be good at anything, because I just didn't, right? I was only in my early 20s, and I didn't feel like I had accomplished anything by that time. Little did I know that I would become quite good at cooking.
It's the mid-1990s. Terri is raising 3 children now and coming out of a marriage carrying $11,000 in debt. So she does what many women have done before her. She gathers what she can, packs up her children, and heads somewhere new. South. And she arrives in a small town, Carrboro, North Carolina, and something in her recognizes it immediately. A feeling of this could work.
Yeah, you feel it. Yeah, it becomes very solid. Oh, I'm here. And I had no idea how I was going to do it exactly, the money or anything, because my husband and I only had debt. We actually divided our debt. So I moved here with $11,000 in debt.
There's a place in the center of Carrboro. It's called Weaver Street Market. It's a gathering place, really, where food, community, and daily life meet. And in many ways, that place becomes part of her foundation. Because it's here that something simple begins. She starts to cook for others. Just a few people at first, one kitchen, then another, and slowly, word begins to travel. From one person to the next, from one home to another.
Yeah, so I was working for $7.50 an hour as a kitchen retail manager, which if you multiply that times 40 hours a week, it's not enough to raise a family on, in an apartment in Chapel Hill. And so I decided that I was going to start a personal chef business. So a friend of mine back in New York, she had given me an article out of the New York Times about the USPCA, which is the United States Personal Chefs Association. And she said, here, maybe when you get to North Carolina, you might want to look into this. Actually, I don't even think I was going to North Carolina when she handed me that article. I found it in a desk drawer when I was packing to leave. So I looked up the USPCA because there was Google, and they wanted $3,000 to start, or $300, didn't matter. I had nothing. So I read what they offered, and I said, well, I can do my own marketing because I know how to do that. And I don't need anybody to give me recipes. So I'll just put an ad in the Village Advocate and say that I'm a personal chef. So I had a new client. They were a couple of women who owned a computer lab. So this is obviously a time when not everybody had a computer. And so they were businesswomen, not young, but they were my age-ish, and they had a fairly new but successful business. And so I read to them a flyer that I was going to put on windshields at Wellspring. And as I was reading, imagine coming home after a hard day of work, and you walk in the house and these aromas are wafting through the house. And Kathy stopped me, and she said, "Why, you sound like a food fairy." And I said, "That's it. Another knowing, right?" I knew the name. Southern Living came to me and asked me if they could do a story about Terri and the Food Fairy. It came out in, I think, May or March of 2000. But I remember thinking, oh my God, I may not even still be in business, because I didn't know that in the summer everybody left left this town and went to the beach or to the mountains. I didn't know that. So when the summers came, I was struggling. But I had miracles, multiple miracles. I am just getting myself out of debt, which, by the way, the Women's Center in Chapel Hill helped me do that. They were immensely helpful with that. And I said, no, I don't want to go back into debt. And then I think somewhere in the summertime, when things were desperate, I called him up. I said, okay, thank you. I'll accept the loan. So that was one of the angels. And then there was another angel who is a well-known artist in the area. And I don't know if I should say her name or not, but she also was using our personal chef services. And I was driving a rickety old car, which was a $2,000 car, which is all I could afford to buy when I moved here. And she said, let me help you. I'll loan you the $20,000 to buy a minivan, which she did, and which I paid back. I paid them both back. Yes.
So this is where things really get interesting, challenging, a bit dicey. Because it's one thing to build a business, to invest everything you have, your time, your energy, your resources, and slowly, steadily create something that works. Something that supports your family, something that you can rely on. Even if it's always a little uncertain, even if there's always some level of risk, some level of debt, because that's often the nature of building and creating anything. But then suddenly, boom, something happens, something that no one can control. The market crashes. And when it does, everything tightens. People become careful, uncertain, afraid. And the first things to go are often the very things they need the most, the things that nourish them. The extras that, in truth, are not extra at all. Personal chefs, yoga classes, massage, the things that help people really feel well, grounded, human. Suddenly, those things are put aside, not because they don't matter, but because survival feels more urgent. And so clients pause, they pull back, they disappear, not forever, but long enough to change everything. And for the people offering those services, the small businesses, the individuals, the ones who have built something with their hands, the impact is immediate. And in Terri's case, almost overnight, she lost the majority of her work, 70% gone. And this is the moment, the one every business owner at some point will face in one form or another, when everything you've built is suddenly at risk. That was 2020, another shock to the system. This time, even faster. Within weeks, 75% of her clients disappear. And once again, she is asked the same question life has been asking her all along. Will you continue? And how will you do it? And once again, she answers yes. She adapts. She finds support. She keeps her team intact. And in the midst of uncertainty, she begins to imagine something new.
But I knew about the PPP program, and I actually had mentors through SCORE, which is retired business people who mentor young businesses. And he called me the poster child for PPP, because the Food Fairy was my child, was my lifeline. Without the Food Fairy, I didn't know how I could make a living. It was money that was probably going to be forgiven, but you might have to pay it back if you couldn't prove all your paperwork, all your numbers, all your employee numbers. But because it was payroll forgot what it stood for, but because I kept people on payroll, I just I gave them something to do, scan these documents, do this, do that. And so I kept people employed, and that's why I was able to keep the PPP money. And so we got PPP 1 and we got PPP 2, and all of it got forgiven. So that got me by. It got us by so well that I could keep people employed even if they weren't cooking, because not everybody wanted us in their home. Yes, well, so because of COVID, right, there are many silver linings that I think we're all finding as a result of COVID, the lessons learned. And so one of the things that hit me was like, well, I'm really stuck here if something like this were to happen again. Because mind you, that's the second time that I've taken huge hits. I was like, if I had a building here and I could cook in, then I could still cook for people here. There's a town in Brazil I used to go to on a retreat, meditation retreats, and they gave away soup. And I was like, okay, I'm going to build this kitchen. It'll be backup for the food fairy, and I can make soup and give it away. So that was the beginning, and it was during COVID. Yeah, so actually, we haven't actually made soup to give away yet. That is going to happen on April 10th. I have a board, and it's bylaws and all the official things. We had to file 990 this year, for taxes, even though we didn't have very much income. But we're getting there. And so, yes, I've got a freezer over there that's full of ingredients. I've worked with the Society of St. Andrews. They offer gleaning of vegetables from farms where the extra either post-mature produce or the farmer's done, they've gotten enough, and it's going to be plowed under. Come and glean these vegetables. Before the big frost in the fall, we went to grab tomatoes, which were going to get killed by the frost. So I've been going out to the fields and gleaning the vegetables and preparing them for the freezer and putting them in the freezer for when it's time to make soup.
And after everything she's built, life asks her once again to begin. In these later years, there's expansion, but not without cost. She takes on something bigger, that vision that has been quietly forming for years. A commercial kitchen, a space not just for her business, but for others. A place where food can be created, shared, and eventually given. She builds it. She adjusts, rebuilds, reimagines. Because by now, this is who she is. Not someone who avoids difficulty, but Terri is someone who moves with it. And slowly, the vision begins to take form. The kitchen opens. Other chefs begin to use the space. New ideas emerge. So I asked her how someone would go about signing up with the food fairy and have a personal chef come to your kitchen and prepare delicious meals. This is what she had to say.
So we start off after a phone call. If they're very interested and they want to go forward, we do a new client interview in their home. The chef will be there because they have a choice of chefs. So, not every chef is available, but from who's available, they get to look online and see who they might like to work with. And actually, including me, 8. Yes, I'm number 8 of the chefs. And so the chef would be there it's a 90-minute interview. And then I'm there for the admin part. The questions are not, what do you like to eat? What do you don't like to eat? But what are your allergies? What are your sensitivities? We wanted to make the same choices that they would make. We want to value what they value. If they value non-GMO, we're going to do non-GMO. If they value organic, we'll get organic. If they value being a carnivore and only eating meat, we'll value that too. We want to be there. If you're a vegan, that's fine too. If you have cancer or you've just had a baby, there's restrictions, and people want us to be able to follow those and make their food delicious and appealing, and yet meet those criteria that are important for their health, that they feel is what's most important for them. So that's what that interview entails. And then after that, they go onto the calendar that we put their name and address and contact information, and then it becomes a recurring event. So if a weekly client and you're on Monday morning or Tuesday morning, that's a recurring event. So, and ahead of that date, that Monday, then the chef would be writing to the client or calling them. Some of our older clients like phone calls versus email or text, and said, these are the ideas I was thinking. You want fish? I was thinking of this one or this one. And you want chicken? I was thinking of this recipe or that recipe. And I know you wanted a vegetarian meal, so these are the options I have. And so then they can pick what their choices, what their preferences would be. And then on the day of the cook, the chef goes to their favorite grocery store, wherever they would have shopped is where we shop, and then shows up at the house with the groceries. Then she or he will unload them, cook the food, package it in the client's containers, label it, put it in the fridge or the freezer, depending on the frequency. Could be weekly or every other week or monthly, or even every 6 weeks. To clean up, take out the garbage, recycling, compost, sweep the floor, put the kitchen back the way it was or better. And then they get an email with the names of the dishes that were made, how many containers, and the reheating instructions. It's all very tidy.
All very tidy, neat, and organized. Well done. So now at 74, you don't mind my saying that, after building not just one, but multiple businesses, and now stepping into a nonprofit, what feels different about this chapter of your life compared to when you started at 47? Listen, standing and cooking for hours and hours is no small thing, you know? Yeah, it can take its toll.
Yeah, so that takes time. It takes time to take care of this body that I didn't feel like I needed to take care of so much when I was in my late 40s. There were a couple of years where I only slept 3 hours a night. That would not work for me now at all. So that's one of the things that feels different. The other is, I guess, my peace, the inner peace, and the experience that I know, the experience I feel has brought me to this point, and I trust more. I have faith that I've been through so many ups and downs, so many hills and valleys. That doesn't mean that I don't really worry so much. I might fret a bit, might fret and wonder. And, my brain is seeking, looking, where's the answer? What's next? But not like it was in the past years. I'd say there's a whole lot more inner peace at this point.
Well, I noticed you mentioned your meditation practice. So how much has that helped with finding that inner peace?
Yes, a lot. Well, a lot. You know that. Yeah, helps a lot. I mean, it also enables one to be mindful and catch the stories that go through your mind that you can grow. We didn't touch on the other disaster within the food fairy was when the North Carolina Department of Revenue in 1999 decided that I had been breaking the law and that I owed $215,000. Yes, because I'd not been charging sales tax. So that was just before COVID. That was in January. They audited me in December of 99. They came back in January and said, you owe this money. I said, I'll see you in court. It was not in their tax bulletin. They claim I was a caterer. And yes, caterers are supposed to do sales tax. I say I'm a personal chef. And according to the health department, I am a personal chef. But according to the Department of Revenue, they have their own definitions. So that number, so I took them to court. It took years because of COVID and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of all that, I lost. And by then, they told me I owed $400 and something $1,000 because of fees and this and that. Yeah. So we settled for the $215,000, which has to be paid within 30 days. But I had an SBA loan that I had applied for during COVID. So I had the money. I was able to pay it and accept the loss. Yeah. So I'm still paying that back, of course, to the SBA. So yeah, we've been through some ups and downs. So yes, and mindfulness that comes from meditation allows one to just be aware and watch the processes of the brain and the mind and how it can take you off off base. And it affects your body too, right? That stress, if you let those stories grow, they end up settling in different parts of your body and can create disease and illness.
Absolutely. I mean, you just begin to live that misery or that despair, right? So so after all of that, let's come back to this final question here. And it's, if you could speak to that woman arriving in Chapel Hill in 1996, got tired, uncertain, carrying everything, children, $11,000 in debt, what would you want her to know?
Ooh, I'm going to cry. She has my heart, I feel for her. I can recall her, right? What would I say to her?
Be bold.
Just keep your heart open.
And
I think she did. I mean, that's when I actually took formal meditation classes back then through Duke. I think you could, somehow I proved I could get it for very little money, even though I didn't have cancer, but I could go to a mindfulness classes at Duke. And so I think that was, that was the beginning of that. I knew about meditation and yoga, but I never really did it much. So that was a big start for me. Also at that time, I had ventricular tachycardia. For 12 years, my heart would go into tachycardia. But I had no health insurance, so I just dealt with it. When finally it came back as soon as I left the hospital, and I had to go back. And I ended up Medicaid actually picked up a good part of that $80,000 bill.
Wow!
But I've been fine ever since.
Right.
Since 2007. Yeah. So courage and flexibility, resilience, keeping an open heart,
determination.
Well, I'm a Cancer, so there's something to be said about a crab, right? They're very tenacious, right?
Right.
And so tenacity is very good. They can also be very clingy and not let go when they should let go. So I think as a younger woman, I was still probably more grasping and less letting go, because I did worry about, I had my children, to feed.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But that was the motivation for starting the whole thing, was enough money to feed my family. And that's total motivation. I never expected I would be here 30 years later. It wasn't that I didn't expect it. I didn't have that vision. I just had to be here now, feeding the family. Yeah.
All right. And so now you're here and you're happy where you are. This is, you feel in a good place?
I do. I have tremendous amount of debt, but I don't lose sleep over. Even with the North Carolina Department of Revenue, I still sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. And now I might take a nap. Actually, yesterday I took an hour nap, but I love where I live. I'm in the trees. I look out at this beautiful commissary. I'm surrounded by a beautiful staff who have hearts as big as the universe, feeding people, loving what they do.
And now you're going to take that food truck out and feed people who have nothing. Hey, Terri, I want to thank you for being on today. And I think you're going to be a great inspiration for so many of all ages. And that's really the whole point to these interviews that I'm doing. Wise women sharing their experience and love.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that opportunity. And I love that last question, that made me cry.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting a little teary-eyed right now myself.
Yeah, those tears tell me that there's a truth here, that there's a real golden nugget within me. So what I've done with that is gone back to myself and said, oh, you are such an amazing woman, Terri. I love you. You've done a good job.
And everybody would agree with that, Terri. Everyone would agree with that. Again, thank you so much, honey. Thank you so much for being on.
You're very welcome. It's really my pleasure. My awakening.
You've been listening to my interview with Terri McClernon, owner of the food fairy and chef extraordinaire. I'm Delia Quigley, and this is Wise Woman Stories. There's plenty more to discover at deliaquigley.substack.com. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.